Hello all and welcome to my Dottie diary. This format of video intends to give you an update on the work I'm up to on weeks where there is perhaps not a lot happening. I noticed there was a lot of pressure on major YouTubers to come up with new innovative concepts every week, and because of that their channels stopped representing their real skills and became click farms, much to their own dismay. And all fairness to them, they've made their hobby their job. Not many artists eat off the back of their own work, so who am I to judge? That said, that's not my intention with this channel. I want to create an experience-based channel. I'm not a master, and I don't suppose my viewers are either, but I do know that we can learn from each other. Now that segue was masterful, because as you've been seeing as I nattered on, I'm doing an artist copy of a painting by Thomas Lawrence of a very rich young woman called Rosamund Hester Elizabeth Croker. You can tell she's rich because of all the names. Thomas Lawrence was a Georgian portrait painter and was considered the height of his profession at the time. Now, with the slow death of the British aristocracy, this type of portrait is no longer in style. But that does not mean we cannot learn from him and seeing his use of paint. For example, I am in awe of the ability to get such smooth and subtle skin tones. I discovered from the copy that actually this comes from the economy of brushstroke. The fewer marks you make, the softer the portrait becomes. Trying to add over paint creates a busier and more haggard look. He uses a strong contrast for drama and depth. To the right of the face seems almost pitch black, so much so it matches the shadow of the hair, eliminating the hairline. But the highlights, especially on the nose, are bright whites, employing a full range of tone, the entire spectrum. The reason I wanted to do an artist copy from him was to work out how to do more lively portraits. One of the best things about Lawrence is the sheer amount of unfinished work he left, giving us glimpses into his process. I was always told it was best to fill in the same tone of colour all over your painting where it was applicable. So if the same skin tone is on the neck and the forehead, you should do both areas at the same time. I guess this is to balance out the painting, so in case you get to it later and it's far too dark or there's a different subtle shade, you've all mixed paint and you've mixed a colour that you're very happy with, and then you come back to it the next day and you just can't get that colour. It's always a bit too yellow, a bit too blue. But if you do it all at the same time, you don't have that problem. It doesn't matter if it comes to reworking it and it's a bit different. That just adds variety. But it doesn't look like the bottom of the painting is a bit yellow and the top of the painting is a bit blue. However, Lawrence clearly worked from the most important area and worked outward from that. I also did learn from other tutorials in oils it was best to work from dark to light. And from my experience on this, that is something I have come to understand. There's a fear of going too dark. But if you start dark on a white canvas, you have the full total spectrum to compare and contrast. If you don't do the darks first, then you don't know where your spectrum is ending up. So when you're trying to compare a mid-tone, you can't compare it to your dark areas because you haven't done your dark areas yet. You can just compare it to the white of the paper. Now this is also true when you're using mid-tone paper. Mid-tone paper is very popular, for example brown craft paper, because you already have your mid-tone. It sits in the centre of the tone spectrum, so you can add dark and you can add light. So it's almost sculptural. You're sculpting your picture out of values. And when you're doing painting, you usually just have a white canvas. You can get linen canvases that are a different colour, or you can put a ground on your canvas. You can make your canvas a brown colour like a mid-tone and then work from there. You can do an underpainting as well. I tried underpainting last year and it was successful, but I found that as I was adding the layers afterwards to add colour, the colours became very subdued rather than the very vibrant colours that I usually have. As for the paints I'm using, they are Sennelier Rive Gauche. This is a test pack I got from Jackson's Art for £5. It's not labelled as either student or professional, but with the price point I would assume that they are student grade. Not being too experienced in oils, I'm not sure I can give a great review. I'll give some feedback as to how I experienced them. They have a nice consistency. They're from a brand name with a good reputation for knowing what they're doing. The colours were primaries that mixed well. Usually I would get a burnt sienna or a burnt umber. Now, burnt sienna has a very strong red tone. It's a red-brown tone, almost like a rust colour. And if you add white to it, you can get a very good base flesh tone. Now, you've painted before, you know that skin isn't just one colour. But if you use burnt sienna, white it down, and then you start adding some perhaps cadmium red, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, burnt umber, you can start to get different values that are in the skin tones rather than trying to do it from scratch every single time. However, I just had the primaries in this, so I had to mix a brown and then white it down. I used citrus solvent from Cassart, and it dried to the touch in a day or two. I'm trying to use water mixable oils. Now, they're very new. They don't have, as of yet, a student and professional gradation, which makes it quite difficult to know the quality of the paint that I'm using in water mixables. So if you go to an art store, you'll get oil colours and you'll get traditional oils, and there will be a professional artist grade, there'll be a student grade, and they'll have water mixables. And the water mixables don't really match into the regular grade system. I'm not sure why that is, because the grade system is not usually about the binder, it's about the pigment load. So the higher the pigment load, the better the quality of the paint. But the water mixable oils don't seem to fall into that. So I'm not quite sure how they're going to hold up, which is a downside right now. But they do seem to be safer than using traditional oil paints, because you're not using a solvent or a turpentine, which is very bad for the lungs. With that in mind, I prefer to use water mixable oil paints. And I think my inexperience in oils has been because of the turpentine. We never used oil paints in school because of the turpentine. It's too dangerous. I never used it at home because, of course, my home isn't especially well ventilated and I don't want turpentine in the air in my house. But if I use water mixables, they're rather like acrylic in that they're easy to clean up. There's no emissions into the air. But the citrus solvent is meant to be safer. I'm not sure how it's safer, but I'm sure people have done those tests. I'm still not 100% on it, to be honest, and I still would rather use water mixables so as not to have any solvents around. I'm going to keep going at oils until I get to that lovely soft blended quality down to muscle memory. Or, as always, the more you do something, the more experience you get, the more it becomes second nature. The more confident you get at doing something, the more you'll do something different, the more you'll take risks, the better you'll get. To get it into the muscle memory, it means doing more artist copies, doing more portraits, and trying to transfer the work that I'm doing from the artist copies into my own work. And that's the key part. Can't copy all the time. You have to get it into your own work in the end. So good luck with your own work this week. And I'll see you soon.